For years ago, I was a broke 28-year-old working at a dying digital marketing agency in Pittsburgh. I had no savings, a mountain of student debt, and an increasing fear that I'd coasted through my 20s without building anything of value. My job was basically copy-pasting ad metrics into PowerPoint decks. My boss once called me Excel wallpaper. But I had one thing going for me. I was obsessed with hot sauce. Not just eating it. I was obsessed with the culture, the creativity, and the massive fandom surrounding it. I knew everything about the Scoville scale, fermenting processes, rare peppers like the chocolate butler, and I followed every indie sauce brand like a sports team. The idea had been in my head for a while, create my own hot sauce brand. But, like every other dream I'd had, I sat on it and kept showing up to work every day. Then in 2020, the agency shut down. No severance, no warning. Just a Zoom call at 4 p.m. saying, "Thanks for your service, good luck." I was furious and humiliated. But more than that, I was free. I took my last $600 and bought fermentation jars, gloves, fresh peppers, and shipping materials. That night I decided, I'm going to make and sell hot sauce from my apartment. If it fails, it fails. I spent 2 weeks testing recipes. My kitchen smelled like vinegar and death. My roommates hated me. But after dozens of tries, I nailed a smoky habanero sauce with notes of pineapple and garlic that made people sweat and smile. I gave out samples in mason jars to friends, neighbors, even Uber drivers. Feedback was overwhelmingly positive, and one guy offered to buy 2 bottles on the spot. I called it Hell's Vest Pocket, a nod to the old cowboy term for a tight, hot place. The name stuck. I designed a label in Canva, printed it at Staples, slapped it on a bottle, and set up a simple Shopify store. I priced it at $9 a bottle plus $3 shipping. My goal was to sell 50 bottles in the first month. I sold 300. I ran out of peppers. I couldn't keep up with demand. A food blogger from Instagram with 40K followers shouted me out, and suddenly I was getting bulk requests from breweries and sandwich shops. I was thrilled and terrified. I had no clue how to scale. I was still doing everything manually, labeling bottles by hand, printing shipping labels, and sealing boxes with duct tape. My living room looked like a pepper cartel warehouse. So I applied for a $10K small business grant through a local Pittsburgh startup incubator. I didn't think I'd get it, but somehow I did. That money was a lifeline. I bought better equipment, outsourced label design, and found a small commercial kitchen that rented space by the hour. I also hired a part-time college kid to help with bottling and fulfillment. By year 2, I'd made $72,000 in sales. Not life-changing, but for someone who'd never made more than $38K in a year, it was a game changer. I invested everything back into the company. I expanded to 3 flavors, the original smoky habanero, a mango scotch bonnet, and a ghost pepper vinegar sauce called Spectral Fire. I started doing farmers markets, pop-ups, and small food expos. I kept hearing people say, "I don't even like hot sauce, but I love this." I started studying CPG strategy like a man possessed. I read everything from the founder of Sir Kensington's, watched hundreds of hours of YouTube interviews with food entrepreneurs, and learned about food safety regulations, co-packing, and distribution models. I made mistakes, too. My first run with a co-packer resulted in 400 bottles that had too much vinegar and no spice. I had to throw them out and eat the cost. Still, I kept going. I bartered sauce for legal help from a lawyer friend, and a CPA I met at a food festival helped me structure the business as an LLC. I was still doing customer service myself, responding to every email personally, which often turned into long conversations about heat tolerance and pairing suggestions. By year 3, I hit 6 figures. We got picked up by a regional Whole Foods distributor who took a chance on us after one of their buyers tried the sauce at a food fair. That changed everything. I had to professionalize the entire supply chain in 3 months, set up EDI systems, hit production quotas, maintain strict batch tracking. It was brutal. I pulled 3 all-nighters in a week at one point, ended up with a kidney infection because I ignored my body. Not smart. But when I saw my sauce on a Whole Foods shelf for the first time, I cried in the parking lot for 10 minutes. Now, year 4, we're doing around $480K in annual revenue. I've got a small team of 4 full-time employees. We're in 70 stores across 5 states. I still run the Instagram account myself. We've been featured in 2 national food blogs and 1 small segment on a travel channel. My parents, who once told me to be realistic and just apply for another agency job, now hand out business cards with the logo on it. I'm not rich. I don't drive a Tesla or live in a high-rise. I still rent the same apartment, though I now use a fulfillment center. But I wake up every day genuinely excited to work. That's new for me. For the first time, I feel like I'm not just existing, I'm building. The biggest lesson? Starting ugly is better than not starting at all. Your first product will be imperfect. Your logo might suck. Your packaging might be crooked. But if your product is good and your intent is real, people will notice. I thought I needed investors, a viral TikTok, or some insider secret. Nah, I needed to care more than the next guy and keep showing up. If you're reading this sitting on an idea and thinking you're not ready, you're lying to yourself. You'll never feel ready. You just have to burn the ships and commit. And if you ever need to spice up your breakfast burrito, hit me up. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. 2 years ago, I was sleeping on a mattress on the floor of a studio apartment in a sketchy part of town, eating canned soup and microwaved rice, wondering if I'd made a huge mistake. My startup had just failed. I was 28. I quit a decent-paying product manager job at a mid-sized SaaS company to pursue what I thought was a genius idea, a curated platform for digital wellness coaches. Think of it like Airbnb, but for life coaches and mental fitness consultants. I sunk my savings, about $37K, convinced a couple of college friends to join part-time, and even managed to raise $60K from a couple of angel investors I met through a founder group on Slack. The first 6 months felt like flying. We launched a slick MVP, got featured in a niche newsletter, and signed up over 1,200 users. But revenue? Almost non-existent. Most coaches didn't want to pay platform fees. Users didn't want to pay subscription costs. Churn was a nightmare. We pivoted twice, first to a B2B model, failed, then to a marketplace with a booking engine, also failed. After burning through cash and morale, I shut it down. I spent the next 3 months broke, directionless, and applying to jobs I didn't want. But that's not the story I'm here to tell. This is the story of how a stupid little side hustle I built in a weekend ended up changing my life. While job hunting, I got a freelance gig from a friend of a friend. They needed help building out a custom Notion workspace for their agency. I'd used Notion heavily during my startup and had made templates for everything: OKRs, content calendars, SOPs, CRM tracking. I knocked it out in a day, and they paid me $400. Not life-changing, but it felt good to get paid for something again. More importantly, I realized I actually enjoyed it. Notion was like digital Lego. So, I started posting on Twitter and LinkedIn about productivity systems, shared some screenshots of my templates, and quietly built a Notion template store using Gumroad. The first month, I made $37. The second month, $114. The third, $580. Then someone asked if I did one on One Consulting. I said yes. Charge $150/AHR, booked out a couple weekends. Then a startup asked if I could build their internal wiki. Charge $1,000. Then another asked me to build a hiring pipeline dashboard. $2,000. That's when I realized this could be a real business. I stopped applying to jobs and went all in on becoming a Notion consultant and product creator. Here's where it got interesting. Instead of just selling one-off templates or hourly services, I decided to treat it like an actual startup. I picked a niche: early-stage startups, pre-seed to Series A. I created a productized offer, a fully custom Notion operating system for startups, team wikis, project trackers, hiring workflows, goal-setting dashboards, etc., delivered in 2 weeks for a flat fee of $500. I called it StartOS. I created a landing page in Webflow, spent $200 on a logo, and started reaching out cold to founders on Twitter, LinkedIn, and indie hackers. I offered to do the first 5 builds at $2,000 in exchange for testimonials and referrals. All 5 said yes. They loved it. One founder told me they scrapped their $15K/your project management tool after switching. Another one shared a tweet about the dashboard I built for them. It went mildly viral. I raised the price to $4 $000, then $5,000. In the first full year, I did $226,000 in revenue. Just me. No code. No employees. No office. Just my laptop and some duct-taped workflows. But I wasn't just building dashboards. I was building systems that saved founders hours a week. I started adding async Loom videos, SOP guides, and quarterly review check-ins. I also built 30-plus pre-made templates for common startup needs, fundraising CRM, OKRs, investor updates. These I sold a la carte on Gumroad. Passive income from templates in year 1? $36K. By year 2, I was booked out 2 months in advance. I raised my prices to $6,500, then $7,500. I started hiring subcontractors, other Notion pros, to help with builds. I created a mini course called Notion for Founders, sold it for $99, and added another $12K in revenue the first quarter. I also got featured in Notion's Creator Spotlight, which drove a ton of traffic to my store. Total revenue in year 2 $412,000. Profit margin? About 85%. No ad spend, just content marketing, cold outreach, and referrals. Now I run a lean studio. There are 4 of us, me, a project manager, and 2 Notion builders. I'm launching a membership community this fall for founders who want to DIY their Notion systems with coaching and support. What's funny is, if you had told me in 2021 that building Notion templates would replace my startup dreams, I would have laughed. But this is a startup. I solve a problem, deliver value, get paid, and grow at my own pace. I own 100% of the business. I work 4 days a week. I travel when I want. I'm helping dozens of founders build better companies with the same tools I used during my failure. And here's the kicker. I'm now making more than the PM job I quit and more than I would have made if that original startup had just limped along. I don't think entrepreneurship has to be about massive VC rounds or big exits. Sometimes it's just about building something people need, with tools you already know, and doing it well enough that they keep coming back. That $37 template sale changed my life more than the $60K angel check ever did. If you're sitting on skills, anything from Airtable to Zapier to Canva, and think it's too niche, I promise you, someone out there will pay for it. You don't need to build the next unicorn. Sometimes, you just need to build the next invoice. In 2017, I quit my job as a software engineer at a mid-sized fintech company to sell wooden watches. Yeah, you read that right. I left behind a $110K/year salary, health insurance, for 1K matching, and free cold brew on tap to start a business selling wristwatches made of bamboo and sandalwood. I wasn't delusional, or at least I didn't think I was. I just wanted something that was mine. I was 29, single, and burning out from Jira tickets and fake stand-ups where we all lied about being almost done. I had savings and a dumb idea I couldn't get out of my head. The idea came from a random conversation at a farmer's market with a guy selling handmade wooden pens. I picked one up, asked if he ever made watches. He said, "Nah, too finicky." My brain said, "Exactly." I spent 3 months doing research, Google rabbit holes, Alibaba chats, Reddit forums, reverse engineering Etsy listings. I finally found a small manufacturer in Vietnam that made custom wood watch parts. I ordered a prototype batch of 50 units. I branded the company Hollow and Grain. It sounded like an overpriced whiskey brand, and that was the point. I built the website on Shopify, spent too much time fussing with the font, and ran a few Facebook ads. The first week, I sold 1 watch. My mom bought it. Week 2, I sold 3. Strangers. Week 3, I sold 20. Someone in Oregon bought 5 at once, probably for groomsmen. I remember doing a little fist pump alone in my apartment like I had just won an Oscar. By month 2, I had sold out of the 50 units. I ordered 200 more. That's when things started to go sideways. First, the new batch was off. The wood was duller, a few faces had hairline cracks, and one had a broken clasp. I had already listed the inventory online by the time they arrived, so I had to make do. I refunded 7 orders that month and replaced another 4. The supplier told me they were overwhelmed with another order and had used a different subcontractor. I should have bailed then, but I didn't. Instead, I doubled the next order to 400 units and asked for higher QC standards. They said yes. Of course they did. Then came my first real break. A YouTuber with 300K subs featured my watch in a 10 unique gifts for men video. I didn't pay him. He found the watch through a customer. I sold 600 watches in 10 days. I oversold by 200. I had to close the site for a week, issue apology emails, and stay up all night manually tracking refunds and pre-orders. At the time, it felt like a good problem to have. Looking back, it was the start of the crash I didn't see coming. In March 2018, Shopify payments froze my account due to unusual transaction volume and high refund ratio. I had nearly $20,000 locked up. I still had bills, customers asking where their stuff was, and now a suddenly untrustworthy supplier. I flew to Vietnam. Not joking. I booked a $1,200 flight using my credit card and showed up at the manufacturer's office in Da Nang. I'm a 6'2" white guy who looked like he belonged at a startup brunch, not in a woodworking factory. They were polite, even helpful. I spent 5 days there. I met the actual woodworkers. I found out they weren't using subcontractors because of volume. They were doing it because my original supplier had resold my order to a cousin who was sourcing parts from China. Half of my watches weren't even Vietnamese anymore. So I cut ties. I spent the rest of the trip visiting 3 other workshops until I found one that felt legit. They only produced about 100 watches a week, but they had a craftsman mentality I liked. I paid more per unit, but the quality was consistent. Back home, I relaunched with a smaller stock and a 4-week pre-order window. I was honest in my emails. We had problems. We fixed them. These are handmade and worth the wait. Surprisingly, people respected that. My refund rate dropped. Reviews improved. I started getting emails from customers thanking me for being transparent. One guy even sent me a photo of his hollow and grain watch on his wedding day. I broke even that year. Not profit, just break even. I lived on my savings and a side gig writing code for a friend's SaaS product. But something was working. 2019 was different. Influencer marketing matured and Instagram ads got cheaper. I started building an email list through lead magnets, free digital guides like how to care for wood accessories. My click-through rates doubled. Then I launched a limited edition ebony model with a leather band. It sold out in 4 hours. Then came 2020. The pandemic was like an earthquake and a windfall rolled into one. On one hand, supply chains collapsed. My small supplier couldn't get materials and international shipping became a mess. On the other hand, online shopping exploded. I took a risk and pre-ordered 3,000 watches. I ran new ad creatives focused on nature, peace, and disconnection from tech. I leaned hard into the minimalist, earthy aesthetic. It worked. Sales tripled. I hired my first employee that August, a friend from college named Sasha who had just been laid off. She handled logistics and customer service. By December 2020, Hollow and Grain had cleared $440K in revenue. I paid myself for the first time in 3 years. Now, in 2025, Hollow and Grain does just under $1.3 million in annual revenue. We have a team of 6, a workshop partnership in Chiang Mai, and a small retail pop-up that we run on weekends in Portland. We still don't mass produce. We release limited collections and sell out about 70% of them within the first week. Am I rich? Not in the way I thought I'd be. I live modestly. I still drive a 2012 Civic. But I own a business that makes people happy, employs good people, and lets me work on my own terms. The most unexpected part? My old boss emailed me last year asking if I could speak at their company retreat about entrepreneurial resilience. I said sure. They paid me more for that 90-minute talk than they used to pay me in a month. Sometimes I still miss the cold brew and the health insurance. But then I look down at my wrist, see the watch I helped design, and remember the factory floor in Da Nang. I remember the 3 a.m. emails to angry customers and the first time I hit refresh and saw 100 orders waiting. It's mine. All of it. Every splinter, every sale. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. 5 years ago, I was sleeping on a futon in a friend's laundry room, living off canned tuna and instant rice, convinced that I had ruined my life. I just turned 31, had burned through the last of my savings, and walked away from a stable, though soul-sucking, marketing job at a mid-sized agency. I quit because I was convinced I could build something better. I had what I thought was a killer idea, a curated subscription box for eco-friendly office supplies, targeted at startups who cared about sustainability but didn't have time to research every pen and notebook they bought. It sounds kind of dumb now, but I genuinely thought I was sitting on gold. For the first few months, things actually went well. I spent a lot of time building partnerships with small green brands, worked with a friend to build a scrappy Shopify site, and started pitching it to my network. By the end of month 3, I had 180 monthly subscribers. Not huge, but I was optimistic. Then I made 2 massive mistakes. First, I overinvested in inventory. I used the last of my emergency savings to pre-purchase 6 months of products from a few small vendors because I wanted exclusive deals. Second, I hired a fulfillment center way too early, assuming growth would make up for the upfront costs. It didn't. By month 5, I had plateaued at around 220 customers and started hemorrhaging money. It turned out that most of my early customers were friends, family, and startup folks supporting me out of kindness. The retention rate was trash. People didn't see the value in getting notebooks and refillable pens every month. By the start of the 7th month, I shut it down. I had $37 in my bank account, $14K in credit card debt, and 6 pallets of unsold inventory I couldn't return. So I did what any defeated entrepreneur does. I panicked, wallowed in shame, then Googled how to liquidate inventory, and found some forums talking about Amazon FBA. I'd heard about it before but dismissed it. Selling pens and notebooks online felt like a step backward. But I needed cash. Badly. I listed my overstock on Amazon. Within 2 weeks, half my inventory was gone. I made back a couple $1,000s. Not much, but more than I expected. Curious, I started studying the FBA model more closely. I spent every day reading subreddits, watching YouTube videos from sellers, and lurking in Discord groups. That rabbit hole changed my life. Within 2 months, I had reinvested the little money I made into sourcing a single new product from Alibaba, a minimalist bamboo desk organizer. It wasn't revolutionary, but it matched the aesthetic I'd built with the old subscription box. I branded it, created some clean packaging, and sent a few dozen units to Amazon. They sold out in a week. I doubled my order, added a second product, a phone stand, and launched a basic brand on Instagram. I called it Modin, short for modern and wooden. I still don't know if that name is good or terrible, but it stuck. Over the next 6 months, I was in the zone. I worked 14-hour days from the same laundry room, slowly growing my listings, experimenting with PPC ads, and building out a product line of sustainable, minimalist desk accessories. I was obsessed. 12 months after my initial failure, Modin cleared $120K in revenue. I'd paid off my credit cards and finally moved into a real apartment. My girlfriend, now wife, moved in, and we turned our living room into a warehouse for packing samples. The second year was where things started feeling real. I invested heavily into branding, photography, and packaging. I stopped thinking like a hustler and more like a DTC founder. My margins were slim. Amazon takes a massive cut, but volume made up for it. I diversified, started selling on Etsy, and eventually my own site again, though Amazon remained the bread and butter. Then came the moment that really shifted the game. A mid-sized co-working space brand reached out after seeing one of my TikToks. They asked if I could fulfill a bulk order of 2,500 custom-branded desk kits. That single deal brought in $70K and forced me to rent actual warehouse space for the first time. I hired 2 part-time employees, one of whom still works with me, and from there, B2B started overtaking B2C. Fast forward to now, 5 years since the laundry room. I run a company with 8 employees, 3 full-time warehouse staff, and a monthly recurring revenue stream thanks to bulk corporate orders. We hit $1.8 in revenue last year. Profit margins sit around 24%. We're not venture-backed. No outside capital. It's still 100% owned by me. I share all this not to brag, because trust me, there were more dumb mistakes along the way than I can count, but because I think too many entrepreneur stories focus on the genius idea that changed everything. Mine was the opposite. My big idea failed. Spectacularly. But in failing, it exposed a path I would have never considered, flipping unsold junk on Amazon. That desperation forced me to learn, pivot, and let go of the ego that told me I needed to invent something revolutionary. Turns out, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You just need to find a wheel, polish it up, and figure out how to sell it to people who need it. If you're in the trenches right now, broke, discouraged, questioning if you're cut out for this, please hear me. Failure is not the end of the story. Sometimes it's the exact beginning you need. I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. I was supposed to be a dentist. My dad was a dentist. My mom ran the front office. I grew up around root canals and fluoride trays, and I hated every second of it. But when you're 17 and unsure of who you are, it's hard to say no to the only path you've ever seen. So I said yes. Pre-dental, University of Michigan. First semester, I sat in chem lectures with 300 other kids, all grinding for the same dream I didn't want. By sophomore year, I was skipping Argo labs to sit in the library and teach myself how to build websites. It started with a Shopify store selling novelty socks. Then a website reviewing productivity apps. None of them made money, but for the first time I felt a tiny firelight inside me. After graduation, I still didn't have the guts to go rogue. I got into dental school. I even went. For a year and a half, I drilled into plastic teeth and pretended I cared about occlusion. But every night, I was online, scrolling hacker news, building dumb apps on weekends, and getting obsessed with bootstrap startups. Then came February 2020. COVID was just a whisper. I was interning at a community dental clinic when I noticed how badly the appointment system worked. Patients were calling, missing appointments, and the receptionist looked like she was one frayed wire from short-circuiting. I asked her why they didn't use something better. She laughed. You know any software made for this mess? That night, I started sketching out a solution. A month later, COVID hit and everything shut down. Dental school went remote, and I took a leave of absence. I told my parents I was overwhelmed. That was half true. The other half was that I finally had time to build the software. I called it Schedula. It was supposed to be a smart, auto-scheduling tool for small clinics. I had no clue what I was doing. I barely knew how to code, and I had zero sales skills. But I was determined. I found 2 other students, one who could design, another who was better at back-end than I was, and offered them equity in a project that didn't exist yet. For 6 months we worked from our bedrooms. I lived off my refund check and a dwindling savings account. We built the MVP in React and Firebase. It was ugly, but it worked. Kind of. I cold emailed 200 clinics. Only 2 responded. One was my old internship site. They agreed to try it out. The software broke constantly. Appointments disappeared, notifications failed, and once it double-booked 6 patients for the same chair. But I fixed things fast. I showed up on Zoom with their receptionist every week. I asked what sucked. I took notes. I pushed code that night. Slowly, things got better. By late 2020, we had 5 clinics using Schedula. They weren't paying much $50/month, but they kept using it. That felt like gold. I reached out to my friend's dad, who owned a chain of 12 dental offices in Ohio. He was skeptical. I offered him 6 months free and on-call support. He said yes. That deal almost killed us. Their office had different workflows, HIPAA requirements, and 40-plus staff. My co-founder nearly quit, but we pushed through. We added features, cleaned up the interface, and finally launched a dashboard that actually made sense. By summer 2021, we had 30 clinics. We were making $5K MRR. Not a rocket ship, but real. That's when investors started knocking. We did a small angel round, $150K from a guy who had sold a healthcare SaaS business. I didn't want VC money. I wanted freedom. But we needed the cash. My laptop was overheating from too many Chrome tabs. With the money, we hired our first full-time engineer. That changed everything. We rebuilt core parts of the app. Speed improved. Bugs dropped. I finally slept through the night without dreaming of null-pointer exceptions. Then came our first real competitor. In late 2021, a company called Toothly, yes, really, launched with a $2M seed round and a slick brand. They had ads on Facebook and Instagram, demo videos with actors in lab coats. We panicked. I almost caved and tried to sell the company. A friend talked me down. We doubled down on customer support. Every clinic had a dedicated chat. We shipped features weekly. We wrote documentation so detailed it made my dental textbooks look vague. And it worked. Clients started recommending us. By early 2022, we were at 100 clinics and $18K MRR. That summer, we broke even. I paid myself a real salary for the first time. $40K/year. My mom was horrified. You could be a dentist, she said. Do you know how much you're giving up? But I didn't care. For the first time, I wasn't faking it. Over the next year, we grew to 300 clinics. We added integrations with insurance systems, automated reminders, even AI transcription for treatment notes. I stopped doing support calls. We hired a head of sales. Our MRR hit $65K. Then one morning, I woke up to an email from a much bigger healthcare software company. They wanted to talk strategic partnership. That's code for, we're interested in buying you. I flew to Boston. We talked for 2 days. They offered $5 million. Life-changing money. I was 28. I said no. Not because I was greedy, but because I knew we weren't done. We were just getting started. Today, Schedulus serves over 1,200 clinics. We're at $180K MRR. We've expanded into physical therapy, optometry, even veterinary clinics. Every week someone emails us to say we made their life easier. Sometimes I still think about dental school. About what life would have been if I had just stayed the course. A house in the suburbs. A safe career. Weekends off. But then I look at my team, my product, and the messages from real users who depend on what we built from scratch, and I remember why I jumped off the rails in the first place. Because sometimes the thing you're supposed to do is the thing you need to leave behind to find the one you were meant for. I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. It happened because of 3 things: desperation, a broken laptop, and the worst boss I've ever had. This story begins in 2019. I was 29, stuck in a soulless marketing job in a windowless office in Des Moines. I had taken the position because I needed the money, and they offered health insurance. My boss, Mitch, was one of those guys who spoke in vague, corporate platitudes but yelled like a drill sergeant if you asked for clarification. Think, we're a synergy-forward team followed by, why the hell would you bring me this garbage? Anyway, my role was to manage small ad accounts for regional clients. I wasn't bad at it, but it was mindless. Run the ads, tweak the bids, send the reports. Rinse and repeat. What made it tolerable was my side hustle. I had started buying clearance electronics online and reselling them on eBay. Nothing huge. Mostly refurbished routers, used phones, sometimes old gaming consoles. It made me a few $100 a month. Enough to buy nice coffee and dream about quitting. Then the pandemic hit. My company went remote in March 2020, and by June, half the staff was laid off, including me. I remember the call vividly. Mitch didn't even pretend to be sorry. We're right-sizing, and you're not part of the future picture. That was it. A week later, I was jobless with $200 in savings, a pile of unsold routers in my bedroom, and a laptop with a cracked screen. I applied for unemployment, tried freelancing, and kept selling what little stock I had left. One night, out of sheer frustration, I opened my browser and typed wholesale electronics bulk. I was hoping to find a better way to get inventory. That search changed my life. I stumbled onto a liquidation site selling pallets of returned electronics from major retailers. The idea was simple. Companies offload customer returns, shelf pulls, and overstock items in bulk to resellers. It was risky. You didn't always know what you were getting. But I was desperate. I took $800 from my savings and bought a mystery pallet labeled Mixed Electronics, Tested Returns. It arrived a week later on a wooden skid wrapped in plastic, dropped on my driveway by a freight truck. I didn't even have a dolly to move it, so I opened it right there, surrounded by boxes and styrofoam. Inside was a goldmine, at least to me. There were 3 working tablets, a box of GoPro accessories, 2 modems, a Bluetooth speaker, and a Chromebook that only needed a new charger. I tested, cleaned, listed everything on eBay, and made $900 in sales in 2 weeks. After fees and shipping, I cleared $200 profit. I bought another pallet. Then 2. I reinvested every dollar. My garage turned into a warehouse. My neighbor complained about the boxes stacked against the shared fence. My girlfriend left after saying she couldn't date someone who hoarded trash for a living. I didn't blame her. It didn't look like a business. It looked like a recycling center. But it was working. By the end of 2020, I had made over $60,000 in profit. I officially formed an LLC in early 2021 and gave it the ridiculous name Biteback Supply, because I was still half joking about all of it. I hired my first employee that spring, a high school kid named Jordan who helped me clean and test electronics for $12/hour. He didn't know much about computers, but he was smart and fast. I also upgraded my operation. I rented a small warehouse space outside the city, invested in better packing equipment, and started sourcing directly from return centers instead of the middleman liquidation sites. That's when the business really took off. Here's something most people don't know. About 30% of electronics returned to major retailers are in perfect working condition. Companies don't have the time or staff to test them all, so they just bulk sell them. If you can learn how to test, clean, and repackage them efficiently, the margins are insane. I brought in $220,000 in revenue in 2021, with a net profit of about $110,000. Not bad for a business that started with a broken laptop. But it wasn't all smooth. In 2022, I got cocky. I took out a small business loan and spent nearly $25,000 on a truckload of premium electronics from a new supplier. I was told it was all shelf pulls and barely used returns. What arrived was 10,000 pounds of absolute junk, cracked tablets, missing cords, water-damaged laptops. Less than 30% of it was usable. That almost killed the business. I spent weeks disputing the shipment, but the fine print saved the supplier and left me on the hook. I worked 16-hour days that summer just to break even, scrapping parts, salvaging what I could, and eating ramen like it was 2009 again. I learned my lesson. I now only buy from vetted suppliers with manifest guarantees, and I inspect everything before final payment. Painful, expensive education. By 2023, Byteback was making enough to hire a full-time tech specialist and lease a bigger space. I diversified, too, selling on Amazon, expanding into refurbished small appliances, and launching our own Shopify store. Last year, we hit $750,000 in revenue. I paid myself $95K and gave out bonuses to my 3 employees, including Jordan, who's now my operations manager. People ask if I'd ever sell the business. I don't know. Maybe. But here's the thing. I didn't build Byteback to get rich. I built it because no one else would hire me when I needed a chance. It became my way out. Sometimes I still think about Mitch. Last I heard, he was laid off in 2021 and started consulting. I saw his LinkedIn post about navigating transitions with purpose. I almost laughed. If I could go back in time to 2020, to that broke guy sitting on the floor surrounded by busted routers and broken dreams, I wouldn't say, it's going to be okay. I'd just hand him a screwdriver and say, start testing. Because sometimes, the only way out is through, and you'd be surprised how far a pile of returns can take you if you're willing to fix what others throw away. I want to share the story of how I went from a college dropout working multiple part-time jobs to building a business that now generates over $5 million annually. It's not a success story that happened overnight, but it's a story of persistence, learning from mistakes, and staying true to what I believe in. If you're looking for a blueprint or a motivational story to keep pushing forward, I hope this helps you on your own journey. I didn't always know I wanted to be an entrepreneur. In fact, I didn't even start my college journey with any clear direction. Like most 18-year-olds, I had no idea what I was doing. I enrolled in a business program, not because I was passionate about business, but because it was a safe bet in my mind. My parents, who had always emphasized the importance of education, were thrilled when I chose a field that seemed like a practical choice for the future. But the reality of college life quickly hit. I was overwhelmed by the coursework, and it didn't help that I struggled with the structure. I had always been someone who preferred to learn by doing rather than reading textbooks. I remember sitting through lecture after lecture, wondering why I was being taught things that felt irrelevant to my real-world goals. The frustration grew over time, and by the end of my second year, I decided to drop out. My parents were furious. They didn't understand why I'd throw away what seemed like a surefire path to a stable career. I tried to explain that I didn't believe in the traditional route and that I wanted to build something for myself. But the conversation didn't go well, and they didn't talk to me for a couple of weeks. This was the first time I really felt the weight of my decision. I was now on my own, financially and emotionally, but I was committed. I didn't have a lot of savings at the time, so I started picking up various part-time jobs to make ends meet. I worked in restaurants, did freelance writing, and even tried my hand at selling used cars. None of these jobs were glamorous, but they taught me something invaluable: how to hustle. The work was exhausting, but it gave me the time and space to think. I began to read books on entrepreneurship, marketing, and startups during my downtime. Slowly, I started developing an understanding of what it took to build something from the ground up. Then one day, something clicked. I was working as a barista in a coffee shop when a regular customer, an entrepreneur in the tech space, struck up a conversation with me. We got talking about business ideas, and I shared with him some of the things I had been reading. He asked me why I hadn't started my own business yet, and it was the first time I actually thought about it seriously. This wasn't just a pipe dream. It could be a reality. I decided to start small. I didn't have a grand vision or a big capital investment. I just knew I had to start. I had been dabbling with website design and basic graphic design, so I figured I'd offer my services as a freelancer. My initial goal was simple: make enough to cover my bills and maybe a little extra. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. I created a website, set up a basic portfolio with some of the projects I had done for friends and local businesses, and began reaching out to potential clients. I pitched myself relentlessly, even when the responses were lukewarm. I sent emails to every business owner I could find, offering affordable website redesigns. My first client was a local yoga studio who was willing to pay me $500 for a redesign of their site. I was ecstatic. It wasn't much, but it was validation. With that first success, I gained more confidence. I expanded my skill set by learning how to run social media ads, create content, and optimize websites for search engines. Slowly but surely, my client base grew. I was able to move from freelance to setting up my own digital marketing agency. The business was still small, but I had built something that could support me and allowed me to work for myself. In the early years, the hustle never stopped. I worked long hours, sometimes 16-hour days. My friends and family thought I was crazy, but they also saw the passion I had for what I was building. They watched as I made mistakes, like the time I accidentally signed a bad contract with a client and had to lose money to get out of it. I learned a lot from those missteps, especially about negotiation and setting clear expectations from the start. Over time, my business began to scale. I hired a couple of employees, and we started to work with bigger clients. The turning point came when I landed a contract with a medium-sized e-commerce company. They needed a complete overhaul of their website and a full-scale digital marketing strategy. I was nervous at first, but I took the plunge and put everything I had into making it work. We ended up tripling their sales in 6 months, which was a game-changer for my reputation. That success opened doors for larger contracts, and the growth of my company became exponential. The next few years were a blur. We expanded our services, adding SEO, paid media, and email marketing to our offerings. We started working with high-profile brands, and our revenue began to grow rapidly. By year 5, we had a solid team of 20 people, and I could step back a little from the day-to-day grind. I focused on scaling, hiring the right people, and establishing processes that would allow us to handle bigger clients and projects. We also diversified our business, launching a SaaS product that helped businesses optimize their digital marketing efforts. It was a risk, but it paid off, and it became a major revenue stream for us. Today, my company generates over $5 million in annual revenue, and I have a team of 50 employees. We've worked with some of the biggest brands in the world, and I'm incredibly proud of what we've built. But the journey hasn't been easy. There have been countless challenges, failures, and setbacks along the way. I've had moments where I wanted to quit, where I doubted myself and the business, but I kept pushing forward. If there's one piece of advice I can give anyone reading this, it's this: don't be afraid to fail, and don't be afraid to learn. Your first idea might not be the one that works, but that doesn't mean you won't get there eventually. Keep hustling, keep learning, and most importantly, trust the process. I'm not a genius or some special kind of person. I'm just someone who got tired of playing it safe, took a risk, and worked hard. If I can do it, so can you. Don't wait for the perfect time, because it's never going to come. Just start, and let the rest follow. I've been running a small business for over 6 years now, and it hasn't been easy. I started with a single idea, a basic vision, and a lot of hope that my dream would become something real. Today, looking back, it feels like a lifetime. It feels like a dream come true, but in reality, it's more of a gritty, hard-fought battle where only perseverance, adaptability, and relentless learning could have carried me this far. I want to share the story of how I built my business from scratch, one failure at a time, and how I've grown it into something that sustains me, even though there have been countless moments when I almost gave up. Maybe someone reading this will find something helpful in my journey. If anything, I hope it can give a sense of what entrepreneurship really feels like. When I first got the idea, I was fresh out of college. I had no job lined up, no experience in the field I wanted to enter, and no real network of people who could help me. But I did have an idea, a simple product that I believed could make people's lives easier. I spent months sketching it out, writing business plans, and reading articles. I didn't have a clear path but thought, if I could just figure out a way to make this happen, I'd be golden. At first, things were not nearly as glamorous as I imagined. There was no excitement, no massive influx of customers, no easy path to success. It started with me working from my kitchen table, calling suppliers, writing emails to potential partners, and reaching out to anyone who could offer advice. My product was a small tech gadget, nothing groundbreaking, but enough to stand out if I marketed it right. The first prototype I ordered came back with so many flaws I nearly gave up on the spot. The material was wrong, the design was poorly executed, and the whole thing looked like a knockoff of someone else's work. But I thought, no, this isn't the end. I can fix it. I spent the next several months reworking the product and testing new prototypes. Every time I thought I was close to something good, the feedback I received from beta testers pointed out more flaws. I had one friend who was kind enough to point out how the thing felt cheap, and honestly, that was a punch in the gut. But as painful as it was, it made me realize I had to commit to getting it right, no matter how long it took. The truth is, I spent thousands of dollars on mistakes. I went into debt, maxed out credit cards, and nearly burned out. But I believed so strongly in the product and the potential it had to help people that I couldn't stop. The breakthrough came when I found a small supplier who believed in my vision. They were willing to work with me, even though I was a nobody, and together we managed to improve the product's quality and design. It wasn't perfect, but it was close enough to put out into the world. Finally, I had something I could sell. I started small, selling through my own website and some niche online marketplaces. At first, I barely made a profit. For the first few months, I lived off ramen noodles, cutting back on everything I could to save money. The early days were tough. Every sale felt like a victory, but they were few and far between. I remember checking my sales dashboard multiple times a day, hoping for that sweet notification of a sale. And when I got it, I was ecstatic. But then came the reality: how do I keep this going? Marketing was where I stumbled the hardest. I had no experience with social media, no understanding of how to grow a following or get the word out. My attempts at Facebook ads and Instagram promotions were disastrous. I spent hundreds of dollars on campaigns that went nowhere. It was frustrating. But over time, I started reading more about online marketing, studying what others were doing, and experimenting with different strategies. I began building an email list, engaging with a small group of followers on Instagram, and writing blogs. Slowly, people started noticing the product, and sales trickled in more consistently. It wasn't easy, and I still wasn't making much, but I was gaining momentum. Then came the second big hurdle: cash flow. I had spent everything I had to get my product into production, and as my sales increased, I quickly realized that I couldn't keep up with the demand. My supplier wanted me to order in bulk, but I didn't have the funds to make a large purchase. I applied for business loans, but the banks weren't interested in lending to someone like me. I didn't have the collateral or a long enough history to convince them. I was stuck in a vicious cycle. If I didn't order more inventory, I couldn't keep selling. If I didn't sell more, I couldn't afford more inventory. So, I got creative. I reached out to my network, family, friends, and even strangers who believed in what I was doing. I ended up launching a crowdfunding campaign on a platform I had heard about but never thought I'd use. To my surprise, it was a success. The funds raised gave me the breathing room I needed to place that bulk order. From there, everything changed. As more products hit the market, I started getting real traction. Customer reviews flooded in, some positive and others critical, but all of them helped me refine the product even further. I hired a part-time assistant to help with customer service, and I invested in better marketing to grow my audience. I also started diversifying the product line, offering complementary items that would increase customer value. A year into running the business full-time, I realized that growth was no longer about just survival. I needed to start thinking bigger. I moved into an office, hired my first full-time employee, and began outsourcing parts of the operation so I could focus on scaling. It was the first time I felt like I was truly building something real. But with that growth came new problems. Managing employees, dealing with overhead, and expanding the product line put me in a new kind of stress. There were months when we struggled to stay on top of inventory, or when customer support demands seemed endless. The work was exhausting, and for the first time, I felt like I was losing control. But then, I remembered why I started. I hadn't come this far to give up. I wasn't going to let a few roadblocks stop me. Instead, I began to lean into the challenges. I hired a mentor who had successfully scaled their own business and spent hours learning about systems, delegation, and leadership. I refined our operations and optimized our supply chain to be more efficient. I was still learning and making mistakes along the way, but now I had a support system in place to help guide me. Today, the business is profitable, and I've learned more about myself than I ever thought I would. It's not a smooth ride, and it's certainly not without its ups and downs. But I'm proud of what I've built. The product continues to help people, my team has grown, and we've expanded into new markets. I'll be the first to admit that there's still so much more to learn, but the journey has been worth every struggle. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that entrepreneurship isn't glamorous. It's long hours, plenty of failures, and a lot of uncertainty. But if you believe in what you're doing and keep pushing forward, you can make something amazing happen. I'm proof of that. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I've been an entrepreneur for about 5 years now, and in those years, I've experienced both the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. It wasn't always like this. It's easy to look at successful businesses and think they just magically happened, but there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that go into building something from the ground up. This is the story of how I built my business, how I almost lost everything, and how, somehow, I managed to turn it all around. Back in 2019, I was just another guy with an idea. I had recently quit my stable job working as a project manager for a tech company. The pay was decent, the benefits were good, and my boss was cool. But there was something missing. I knew deep down that I wanted to create something of my own. I wasn't sure what that something was, but I was sure of one thing. I wanted to be my own boss. I didn't have a business degree or any formal training in entrepreneurship. What I had was a strong desire to be independent and a ton of time on my hands. After months of brainstorming and late-night internet searches, I decided to go with a business model that I felt I could grow quickly and scale. I was going to start an e-commerce store, specifically focused on selling niche, high-quality kitchen gadgets. I'm sure you're already thinking, oh, another e-commerce store? There are thousands of those. And you're right. There are tons of people selling kitchen gadgets online. The market is flooded. But here's the thing. I didn't want to sell just any kitchen gadget. I wanted to focus on unique, innovative, and high-quality products that weren't widely available in big-box stores. I wanted to be the go-to place for someone who was into cooking and wanted something special that couldn't be found on Amazon or in Walmart. The first few months were tough. I spent countless hours researching suppliers, talking to manufacturers, and trying to figure out how to market my store. I was doing everything by myself: product sourcing, website design, social media marketing, customer service. There were times when I felt like I was drowning in work, but I couldn't stop. I launched my website in December 2019. The first sale didn't come until nearly 2 weeks later, and when it did, it felt like winning the lottery. I celebrated that first sale like I'd just hit a jackpot. It wasn't much, just a small kitchen tool, but to me, it was everything. It meant that someone, somewhere, trusted me enough to buy from my brand. The first couple of months were a blur of trial and error. My Facebook ads weren't converting as well as I'd hoped, and my Instagram was growing slowly. I started to question if I had made a huge mistake quitting my stable job. There were days when I thought about throwing in the towel, but I kept pushing forward. Then, in March 2020, the pandemic hit. Businesses were shutting down, and people were losing their jobs. It was a scary time for everyone. The world seemed uncertain, and I wasn't sure what to do next. However, as the pandemic continued, something unexpected happened. Demand for home cooking supplies skyrocketed. People who were stuck at home started cooking more, and they were looking for tools that could make their kitchen experience better. My sales exploded. In 1 month, I saw more revenue than I had in the previous 6 months combined. I couldn't believe it. I had a wave of customers coming in, and I was scrambling to keep up. But that was the easy part. The real struggle began when I couldn't scale fast enough to meet the demand. I was running low on inventory, and my suppliers were experiencing delays. I was losing customers left and right because they were waiting weeks for their orders to arrive. The stress was overwhelming. I made the mistake of not setting up the right logistics. I relied too much on a few key suppliers, and when the world was thrown into chaos, they couldn't keep up with my orders. This led to back orders, delayed shipments, and a reputation that was starting to sink. I had no backup plan, no backup suppliers, no contingency strategy. I was on the verge of losing everything I'd worked so hard for. That was the lowest point in my entrepreneurial journey. I'd spent years building this brand, and now it seemed like it was all about to crumble. I even started drafting emails to customers, apologizing and offering refunds. I thought about shutting down my website and calling it quits. But then, something clicked. I realized that every business goes through growing pains, and this was mine. Instead of throwing in the towel, I decided to take a step back and reevaluate. I contacted new suppliers, negotiated faster shipping options, and invested in inventory management software. I even worked with a logistics expert to help streamline my processes. Slowly, things began to improve. My customers started receiving their orders on time, and I managed to rebuild my brand's reputation. By the end of 2020, things had stabilized. The next few years were a mixture of highs and lows, expanding the product line, dealing with increased competition, and finding new ways to market my business. But through it all, I learned some crucial lessons that have stuck with me to this day. 1. Know your suppliers. I can't stress this enough. You need reliable partners who can keep up with your growth. Having multiple suppliers and backup plans is crucial, especially in times of crisis. 2. Don't be afraid to fail. I thought I was going to lose everything in 2020, but it was during that failure that I learned the most valuable lessons. Failing doesn't mean the end. It's an opportunity to grow and improve. 3. Adapt quickly. The market is always changing. You have to be flexible and adapt to new circumstances. Whether it's shifting customer demands or new competition, being able to pivot is key. 4. Customer service is everything. I can't tell you how many times I've had a customer thank me for how quickly I responded to an issue or how much effort I put into resolving a problem. Happy customers are loyal customers. 5. Don't let the numbers get to you. There were times when I felt like I wasn't making any progress, but I had to remind myself that growth takes time. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Fast forward to today, and my business is stronger than ever. I've expanded into new markets, launched new product lines, and built a team of dedicated individuals who share my vision. I've learned to balance work with personal life, and I'm finally able to take a breath and enjoy the fruits of my labor. The journey wasn't easy, and there were many times when I thought about quitting. But in the end, it was all worth it. If you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple. Be patient, learn from your mistakes, and don't give up when things get tough. Success doesn't happen overnight, but with persistence, you can make it happen. So, to anyone out there on the entrepreneurial grind, know that you're not alone. We've all been there. But if you stick with it, you can turn your dreams into reality. I grew up in a small town where opportunities were scarce, and the only thing you could do was follow in the footsteps of your parents or move to a bigger city for a shot at something better. Neither option appealed to me. My parents were hardworking, blue-collar folks who ran a small hardware store. They were practical people, and their mindset was, work hard, stay humble, and you'll get by. That was fine for them, but I always knew I wanted something more. I wanted to create something bigger than myself, something that would make an impact. In high school, I wasn't the most academically gifted. I wasn't terrible, but I also wasn't the kid who aced every test. What I did have was an innate curiosity and a drive to make things work. I tinkered with things, mostly electronics. I started repairing gadgets for my friends, and later on, even some of the teachers. I remember fixing the projector in the gymnasium one day after school, something that had been broken for months. My friends thought I was crazy, but I got it working, and that was when I realized that I loved solving problems and creating value. When it came time to think about college, the idea of studying something practical felt right to me. I ended up going for a degree in engineering, but even as I was taking the courses, I found myself more interested in business ideas than engineering problems. It wasn't that I didn't like engineering. I did, but I wanted to build something of my own. I started researching small startups in my spare time, reading books on entrepreneurship, and taking online courses. During my second year, I had an idea. It came from one of those late-night brainstorming sessions when I couldn't sleep and was scrolling through my phone. I had noticed that a lot of small businesses were struggling with online marketing. They weren't tech-savvy enough to understand how to use social media to their advantage, and they weren't reaching enough customers. I realized that there was a gap in the market for a service that could help them leverage online marketing without needing them to become experts. I didn't have much money to get started, so I spent a couple of months building a website in my dorm room. It was basic at first, just a simple landing page that talked about helping small businesses grow their online presence. I didn't know much about web design, but I learned fast. My first client was a local pizza place in town. They were struggling with getting the word out to people who lived outside of a 5-mile radius. I built them a website and set up social media accounts, and within a month, their orders increased by 30%. That was my first taste of success. It wasn't huge, but it was a start. Word spread, and soon, I had a few more clients. It wasn't a full-fledged business yet, but I was making enough money to pay for my college tuition and cover my living expenses. By my senior year, I had 3 part-time employees, all of whom were also students. They helped with web design, content creation, and customer support. We started getting more referrals, and before long, we had a steady stream of small businesses signing up for our services. Graduating with a business that was already making money felt like a dream come true, but I knew that I had to scale it if I wanted to achieve something truly impactful. After graduation, I moved back to my hometown to be closer to my family, and that's when things really started to pick up. I invested all my savings into the business and hired a small team of people with the skills I didn't have. I was lucky enough to find a few talented individuals who shared my vision, and we worked relentlessly to improve our services. We expanded from just offering web design to a full suite of digital marketing services, including SEO, email marketing, and paid ads. The next couple of years were a roller coaster. There were moments of pure euphoria when a major client signed on or when our revenue doubled in a quarter. But there were also moments of doubt. There were times when we struggled to keep up with demand, and times when I wondered if we were doing everything right. It's easy to get lost in the weeds and think that failure is just around the corner. But the thing that kept me going was that every time we hit a roadblock, we found a way around it. Whether it was adjusting our strategy, improving our processes, or just working longer hours, we pushed through. By year 3, we had grown significantly. We moved into a proper office and started hiring full-time employees. We also started working with larger clients, including some national brands. The business was doing well, but I wanted to do more. I wanted to create something that would help people not just in my town or my state, but across the country. In my 4th year, I made a huge decision. I decided to pivot the business. I wanted to create an online platform that would make it easier for small businesses to manage their digital marketing. The idea was to give small business owners access to powerful tools like social media schedulers, email automation, and SEO analysis that were usually only available to large companies with deep pockets. This pivot meant rebranding, redesigning the website, and rebuilding our services from the ground up, but I felt that it was the right move. The first version of the platform was launched a year after we made the decision, and it wasn't perfect. In fact, it was far from perfect. But it worked. We started signing up more customers who loved the idea of managing their marketing in one place. We had the right timing. Small businesses were hungry for tools that would help them compete with the big players without having to break the bank. Over the next 2 years, we iterated, improved, and expanded the platform. The business grew exponentially, and we began attracting investors. In year 6, we closed our first round of funding, which allowed us to scale even faster. We hired more developers, expanded our marketing team, and pushed our platform to new markets. We didn't just grow in revenue, we grew in the impact we had on small businesses. We were helping thousands of entrepreneurs across the country get their start in digital marketing without feeling overwhelmed. Now, years later, I look back at how far we've come. What started as a side hustle in my dorm room has turned into a company that employs over 200 people. We've helped tens of thousands of small businesses grow, and we're just getting started. But what stands out to me the most isn't the money, the recognition, or even the success we've had. It's knowing that I built something from nothing, a vision that I had when I was just a curious kid with a love for solving problems. I made something real, and that's the most fulfilling thing I could have done. Starting a business isn't easy. There are days when you question everything. But if you have a vision, a relentless drive, and a willingness to learn and adapt, you can create something truly special. The road won't always be smooth, but every challenge is an opportunity to grow. And for me, that's what entrepreneurship is all about: solving problems, creating value, and making a difference, one step at a time. I've always been the type of person who's driven by a vision. For as long as I can remember, I've been the one at the front of every group project, the one trying to solve problems before anyone else even saw them coming. But I never thought that drive would turn into an actual business. Let me take you back to how it all started. I grew up in a small town in the Midwest. My parents weren't wealthy, but we always had what we needed. My dad was a mechanic, and my mom worked as a receptionist at a local law firm. They taught me the value of hard work and responsibility, but they never pushed me to follow their paths. They just wanted me to do what made me happy and succeed at it. After high school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I thought about college, but the idea of taking on student loans for a degree I wasn't sure about didn't sit well with me. I decided to take a gap year to figure it out. During that year, I worked a bunch of odd jobs, waiting tables, bartending, even some construction work. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me an appreciation for the value of time and money. I realized quickly that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life working for someone else. I wanted to build something on my own. So, at 19, I decided to start a small online store. I had no formal business education, no mentorship, and absolutely no idea what I was doing. But I had one thing going for me. I was willing to learn. I started by selling things I thought I could source cheaply, mostly phone accessories, tech gadgets, and random trinkets. I set up a website on Shopify and learned how to market through Facebook ads. I won't lie, it was a mess at first. I spent money on ads that went nowhere. I bought inventory that didn't sell, but I kept going. One night, about 3 months into this venture, I had a major breakthrough. I was sitting on my couch, scrolling through Instagram, when I saw an ad for a product that immediately caught my eye, a small, handheld blender for making smoothies. I thought, this is it. This is the kind of product people would buy. I looked it up on Alibaba and found a manufacturer that could sell it to me for a fraction of the price that competitors were charging. I ordered a small batch of 50 units, threw together a basic landing page, and ran an ad. To my surprise, people actually bought it. Slowly at first, but they kept coming. I sold out of my first batch in a few weeks, and I reinvested the profits into more inventory. The business grew, but it wasn't without its challenges. One of the toughest moments came when I had a shipment stuck in customs for a month. I had customers already waiting, and the pressure was mounting. I was tempted to just refund everyone and quit, but I didn't. I spent hours on the phone with customs, and finally, the shipment was released. That experience taught me the importance of persistence and patience, two things I never thought would be so vital in business. The blender business didn't stop there. It became the cornerstone of my online store, and I expanded into other kitchen gadgets. I added everything from air fryers to food processors. I began to focus on branding, getting a unique logo, improving the website, and running better ads. Things really started to take off when I discovered the power of influencer marketing. I reached out to influencers on Instagram and TikTok, offering them free products in exchange for reviews. That tactic exploded my sales, and soon I had a community of loyal customers who were obsessed with my products. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. One of the biggest hurdles I faced was managing growth. I went from handling every part of the business myself, product sourcing, customer service, order fulfillment, to hiring employees. At first, I brought on friends who had been supportive of my journey, but that was a double-edged sword. While they were great people, they didn't have the experience to run the company the way I wanted. Eventually, I had to make tough decisions. I let go of a few people, which was incredibly hard, and hired people who had the skills to take the business to the next level. It was during this period of growth that I learned the importance of delegating. I couldn't do everything myself anymore. I hired a social media manager, a logistics coordinator, and a customer service team. I started focusing on scaling the business rather than handling every single task. It wasn't easy letting go of control, but it was necessary. The real turning point came when I started exploring new channels of distribution. Instead of relying solely on Shopify, I opened up accounts on Amazon, eBay, and Walmart Marketplace. This decision tripled my sales almost overnight. I'd always been hesitant about Amazon because of the fees, but I realized that the exposure was worth it. I wasn't just selling to people who knew about my brand anymore. I was reaching a global audience. The revenue numbers were insane, but it also brought its own set of problems, managing orders from multiple platforms, keeping inventory levels synced, and dealing with customer complaints across various channels. Over the next couple of years, the business grew exponentially. I wasn't just a one-man show anymore. I had a small team working with me. But despite all the success, I still faced a lot of doubt. Was this sustainable? Was I just riding a wave that would eventually crash? I had moments of burnout. There were weeks where I barely slept, juggling marketing strategies, dealing with inventory shortages, and handling customer complaints. I thought about quitting more than once. But then I'd get a message from a customer saying how much my product had helped them, and it reminded me why I was doing this. Fast forward to today. My business is thriving. I'm no longer the one sitting at the desk answering every email and packing every order. I've scaled up to a full-fledged e-commerce company with over 20 employees. We've launched new product lines, expanded internationally, and even secured some investor funding. I'm still learning every day, but I've come to realize that the journey of entrepreneurship is less about the destination and more about the process. Starting a business isn't easy, but it's worth it if you're willing to put in the work and keep pushing, even when things get tough. I've had to make hard decisions, face failure, and learn from my mistakes, but every step has been a lesson in growth. If you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple: take the leap. You don't need to have everything figured out from the start. Just take one step, then another, and before you know it, you'll be running something you're proud of. Would I do it again? Absolutely. The freedom, the challenges, the highs and lows, it's all part of the ride. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. This is the story of how I started my small online business with almost no capital and managed to scale it to a profitable venture. It's been a wild ride, and I think it's one of those stories where persistence and a bit of dumb luck got me to where I am today. A little background on me. I had always been someone who hated working for someone else. I was never content with the typical 9 to 5 grind. After graduating college, I tried my hand at a few different jobs. Nothing special, but nothing terrible either. I worked as a marketing assistant at a small firm for a while, then I did a brief stint in sales for a tech company. Neither job was horrible, but I quickly realized that I was just another cog in the machine. The thought of spending decades in the corporate world was enough to give me anxiety. It wasn't until one day I was scrolling through Reddit, as I often did during lunch breaks, that I came across a thread that changed my life. It was one of those "I quit my job to start a business" success stories that seems to show up every now and then. The guy was talking about how he started a small e-commerce store selling niche products and how, over time, he was able to grow it into a 6-figure business. At the time, I thought, if he can do it, why can't I? I was skeptical, of course. I had no experience running a business. I had no idea about e-commerce, marketing, or logistics. But something about the idea of creating something from scratch appealed to me. After a lot of late-night Googling, reading articles, watching YouTube videos, and of course, diving into Reddit threads like the one I saw, I decided to take the plunge. It all started with a ridiculously simple idea. I had a hobby of collecting vintage watches. It was something that had always interested me, and I had amassed a small collection over the years. I often found myself on online forums and eBay, hunting for obscure brands or rare pieces. One day, as I was browsing a forum, I noticed that there were a lot of people looking for specific replacement watch straps, but they had to deal with unreliable sellers or high prices. That was when it clicked. What if I could create an online store that sold high-quality, affordable replacement watch straps? There was definitely a market for it, and it wasn't something that seemed overly complicated to start. I already knew a thing or two about watches, so it felt like a natural fit. The next step was figuring out how to source the straps. I knew I couldn't make them myself. I'm not exactly a skilled leather worker, but after a lot of research, I found a few manufacturers overseas who could provide quality straps at a reasonable price. I ordered a small batch of different types to test the waters. Now came the tricky part, building the website. I had no technical skills to speak of. I wasn't a coder, and the idea of creating a sleek, professional-looking e-commerce website seemed daunting. I looked into Shopify, WooCommerce, and other platforms, but I was overwhelmed by all the options. Finally, I just bit the bullet and paid for a basic Shopify plan. I spent several days watching tutorials, tweaking templates, and making sure everything was set up properly. It wasn't perfect, but it was functional. By this point, I had spent maybe $2,000, mostly on the straps, website fees, and some basic marketing materials. I wasn't sure how well it would do, but I was excited to see if it could take off. The first few weeks were slow. I didn't have much traffic, and I didn't know how to market the store effectively. I tried a little bit of everything: Facebook ads, Instagram posts, reaching out to watch forums, but nothing seemed to get the ball rolling. I was about to give up when I received an email from a small influencer in the watch niche who had found my store through a Reddit post I had made. He offered to review my straps on his YouTube channel in exchange for free product. That was a turning point. The video he made wasn't anything fancy, but it was real. He showed off the straps, compared them to other brands, and explained why they were a good deal. The response from his followers was overwhelming. I started getting orders from all over the world, and the traffic to my site surged. I couldn't believe it. From that moment on, I made sure to send out products to influencers who had a following in the watch community. Over time, I refined my marketing strategy. I learned the ins and outs of Facebook and Google ads, and I started working with a few watch influencers to feature my straps. I also began running promotions, offering bundle deals, and experimenting with discount codes to encourage repeat business. But the real game changer came when I started building a brand. Instead of just selling random watch straps, I positioned my store as a premium brand with a focus on quality and customer service. I started posting high-quality content on Instagram, showing off different strap combinations, watch collections, and how-to videos. I connected with watch enthusiasts on Reddit and other forums, and slowly, word of mouth spread. Within a year, my business was profitable. By year 2, I had hired a small team to help with customer service, order fulfillment, and marketing. I had learned a ton about logistics, supply chain management, and scaling a business. The best part? I was my own boss. I could work from anywhere, set my own schedule, and not have to answer to anyone but myself. It hasn't been without its challenges. I've dealt with inventory issues, shipping delays, and even some terrible customer service situations that required me to eat the cost of some products. There were moments when I thought about giving up, but I pushed through. I had built something from the ground up, and I wasn't about to let it fail. Now, 3 years in, my business is still growing. I've expanded my product range, improved my website, and even started offering custom straps. I'm not a millionaire, but I've built a sustainable business that provides for me and my family. And that's something I never thought would happen. More than that, I love what I do. I get to work on something I'm passionate about, and I've created something that helps people express their own style and love for watches. If there's one thing I've learned through all this, it's that starting a business is less about having all the answers and more about figuring things out as you go. You won't have all the knowledge or experience when you start, but if you're willing to put in the work, learn from your mistakes, and stay persistent, you can make it happen. It's not easy, but it's incredibly rewarding. This is the story of how I went from barely scraping by with a side hustle to building a full-time business that now generates more than 6 figures a year. It's not the usual success story where everything falls into place from day one. I had my fair share of failures, lessons, and moments when I thought I would never make it. But here we are, and I hope my journey will help someone else who's in the same shoes I was a few years ago. I've always had the entrepreneurial itch. Since I was a kid, I was the one selling lemonade on the street corner or trying to negotiate better deals on the toys I'd trade with friends. But life didn't hand me the opportunity to jump straight into business. I went to college, got a degree, and worked a series of dead-end jobs just to make ends meet. I wasn't happy, but I figured it was what I was supposed to do. Then, in my mid-20s, I found myself in a situation where I couldn't ignore the urge to try something on my own anymore. I was working at a corporate job that paid well, but the work was soul-crushing. Every day, I'd sit at my desk and stare at the clock, just waiting for the workday to be over. I started searching for side hustles to fill my time and, hopefully, make a little extra cash. At first, it was all the usual stuff: affiliate marketing, dropshipping, blogging, etc. I spent hours researching, building websites, and setting up ads, but nothing really stuck. The money was small, and the effort was huge. But then, one day, I stumbled across something that clicked: print on demand. It seemed perfect: low risk, low overhead, and the ability to create custom designs for shirts, mugs, and other products without ever having to hold inventory. I set up a store on one of the popular platforms and started experimenting with different designs. I knew nothing about graphic design, so I outsourced the designs from freelance platforms. Some of them were bad, but I didn't care. I was learning, and the barrier to entry was low enough that I wasn't losing too much money. I used my spare time to market my products on social media, mostly Instagram and Facebook, and slowly, very slowly, started making sales. The first sale felt like a huge win. I made a profit of $5 on a t-shirt, but it was proof that the idea worked. It wasn't much, but it showed me that this wasn't just a pipe dream. I could actually make money by selling things I didn't physically have to produce. But I didn't stop there. I kept learning, tweaking my designs, experimenting with ads, and figuring out how to drive traffic to my store. As I continued to scale my print-on-demand business, I faced many challenges. For one, I was working full-time, so managing my side hustle became a juggling act. I'd spend my mornings and evenings researching trends, designing new products, or fine-tuning my marketing strategy. There were moments when I felt exhausted, and I wondered if it was all worth it. But the thought of eventually leaving my job and working for myself kept me going. It took about a year of consistent effort before I started seeing a real profit. My side hustle had grown enough that I was making an extra $1,000 to $2,000 a month. It wasn't life-changing, but it was more than I had ever made doing anything else online. The big breakthrough came when I ran a viral campaign on Facebook for one of my designs. The ad took off, and I ended up selling over 200 t-shirts in a week. That was the moment I knew I had something special. But even with that success, I still had to figure out how to scale. I realized that if I wanted to grow, I had to automate as much as possible. That meant hiring freelancers to help with customer service, social media management, and graphic design. I started reinvesting profits into more ads and expanding my product line. I also started building an email list, which proved to be one of the best decisions I made for long-term growth. It wasn't an overnight success, though. I made plenty of mistakes along the way. There was the time I ran a massive ad campaign and lost money because I didn't test my target audience properly. Or the time I ordered a large batch of custom products only to find that the quality was terrible. I had to refund customers and eat the costs. But every mistake taught me something valuable about running a business. By the end of my second year of selling print-on-demand products, I was making around $5,000 a month. I'd reached a tipping point where I felt confident enough to quit my full-time job and focus on my business full-time. It was a huge risk, but I knew I'd never get to where I wanted to be if I didn't take the leap. Since quitting my job, I've scaled my business even further. I've expanded into other niches, created a brand that resonates with my customers, and built a team to help me with the day-to-day operations. I now make more than $100,000 a year, and while that's a huge milestone, it's not what keeps me going. What keeps me excited is the freedom to build something from the ground up, to experiment with new ideas, and to keep learning. One of the most rewarding aspects of this journey has been the relationships I've built with other entrepreneurs. Over the years, I've connected with people who are also building their own businesses, and we've shared knowledge, swapped advice, and supported each other during tough times. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that entrepreneurship doesn't have to be a solo journey. Looking back, I realize how far I've come. It wasn't an easy road, and there were many times I thought about giving up. But each failure and setback was just a stepping stone towards something bigger. If you're thinking about starting your own business, I'd say this: take the leap, even if it's scary. Don't expect everything to go smoothly, and don't be afraid to fail. But most importantly, keep going. The only way you truly fail is if you quit. If I can go from making $5 on a t-shirt to running a six-figure business, I believe anyone can do it. All it takes is a bit of hustle, a willingness to learn from your mistakes, and the patience to keep working even when it feels like progress is slow. I'm proof that persistence pays off. Now, I'm working on expanding into new markets and testing new products. The road ahead is long, but I'm excited for what's next. If you've got a dream or a side hustle you've been thinking about, take it from me. It's worth it. Take the first step, and you might just find that it leads to something far bigger than you ever imagined. I've always been one of those people who believe that success was just a matter of timing. You know, that right place, right time kind of thinking. I grew up in a small town where opportunities were limited. No one ever talked about entrepreneurship, and the idea of building a business from scratch seemed like a dream for people in big cities. But I was determined not to let the limitations of my surroundings stop me. The turning point came when I was 22. I had just finished college with a degree in marketing, which honestly felt like a useless piece of paper in a town that wasn't exactly a hotbed for new businesses. I ended up working as a marketing assistant for a small, local company that sold office supplies. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. And I figured that if I could learn the ropes of marketing, it would at least give me some experience that could lead to something bigger down the road. But I hated it. The people were nice, but the work felt like a dead end. I spent my days cold calling potential clients who had no interest in our product. The company was stuck in the past, and I couldn't see a way to make a real difference. The whole thing felt like a treadmill I couldn't get off. I needed a change. And it came in the form of a random conversation I had with my cousin, Ben. Ben had always been a little more entrepreneurial than I was. He had this ability to see opportunities everywhere, while I was still caught up in the idea that you had to play by the rules to get ahead. One evening, we were having dinner, and Ben started talking about how the world was shifting towards e-commerce. He mentioned how people were increasingly shopping online and how businesses that weren't adapting were going to be left behind. At the time, I didn't fully understand the scope of it, but something clicked in my mind, and I decided to dig deeper. I spent the next few weeks researching e-commerce trends, reading blogs, watching YouTube videos, and consuming everything I could about starting an online business. I realized that I didn't need to wait for the right time or for some big opportunity to come my way. I could create my own path. I didn't have much money saved up, but I had a small budget and a ton of time on my hands. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to get started. I decided to launch an online store selling custom-designed t-shirts. It seemed like a low-risk, low-investment idea, and I figured that with my background in marketing, I could at least get the word out. I spent hours designing my website, researching suppliers, and figuring out how to set up an online store. It was a steep learning curve, and honestly, there were times I wanted to quit. But something inside me kept pushing me forward. I wasn't about to give up on this crazy idea just because it was hard. The first few months were brutal. I made barely any sales. In fact, there were days when I'd check my website analytics and see that no one had even visited my site. I'd send out marketing emails, post on social media, and beg friends and family to buy something. It felt like no one cared. But I didn't quit. I kept tweaking my marketing strategies, experimenting with different designs, and trying new platforms to get my products in front of people. One day, I came up with a t-shirt design that I thought was clever, something that would resonate with the younger, more socially conscious crowd. It was simple, bold, and had a message that felt like it could go viral. I posted the design on Instagram, and for the first time, people actually started taking notice. The likes started pouring in, and soon I was getting DMs asking where they could buy the shirt. I was ecstatic. I hadn't made much money yet, but the validation was all I needed to keep going. The real breakthrough came a few months later when I partnered with a popular influencer who wore one of my shirts in a sponsored post. The influencer had a huge following, and overnight, my sales skyrocketed. I remember waking up to dozens of orders, each one feeling like a small victory. That was when I realized the true power of social media and influencer marketing. From there, the business took off. I reinvested the profits back into advertising, hired a small team to help with customer service and fulfillment, and expanded my product line. Over the next year, my online store went from a side hustle to a full-fledged business. I went from barely making enough to cover my expenses to hitting 6 figures in revenue. But the journey wasn't without its challenges. Like any entrepreneur, I faced plenty of setbacks along the way. I had issues with suppliers, experienced growing pains, and even had to deal with a customer service nightmare at one point. But each time something went wrong, I learned from it and made adjustments. The business grew faster than I could keep up with, and I had to learn how to delegate, how to hire the right people, and how to manage my time effectively. One of the biggest challenges came when I realized I needed to scale the business beyond just myself. I could no longer wear all the hats, and I needed to hire a team to help with operations. But finding the right people was tough. I hired a few people who weren't the right fit, which set me back both in terms of time and money. But I eventually found a solid team that shared my vision and passion for the brand. Having the right people around me made all the difference. The more successful my business became, the more I realized that it wasn't just about selling t-shirts anymore. It was about creating something bigger, something that could provide jobs, create a positive impact, and inspire others to take risks and chase their own dreams. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. From a small-town marketing assistant to running a successful e-commerce brand, the journey has been anything but smooth. But every failure, every setback, and every sleepless night has been worth it. I've learned that success isn't just about timing. It's about perseverance, adaptability, and being willing to take risks. It's about believing in yourself even when no one else does, and pushing through the tough times when it feels like you're getting nowhere. If you're reading this and wondering if it's too late for you to start something of your own, I'm here to tell you it's not. If I can do it, anyone can. You don't need a ton of money or a fancy degree. You just need determination, a willingness to learn, and the courage to take the first step. I'm still learning every day, but I'm proud of what I've built. And if my story can inspire even one person to take that leap of faith and pursue their dreams, then it's all been worth it. I always thought I was just like anyone else, dreaming big but never really acting on those dreams. I was working a regular 9-to-5 job, just like most people. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't fulfilling either. The thought of doing something for the rest of my life that didn't make me feel alive was terrifying. But it wasn't until I was 29 that the spark finally lit for me, and I decided to quit my job and start my own business. Little did I know, the path ahead would be much harder than I ever imagined, but it would also be the most rewarding thing I'd ever do. It all started when I was working as a marketing associate at a medium-sized tech firm. I was decent at my job, but I wasn't passionate about it. Every day felt like the same grind, and I could see my coworkers growing more disengaged by the week. I remember one particular moment that changed everything. I was at my desk, just scrolling through social media, when I came across an article about someone who had quit their job to start a business in something they loved. They'd gone from struggling in their garage to building a multi-million-dollar brand. I couldn't stop reading it. The story resonated with me deeply. It was as if the article had spoken directly to my soul. That night, I went home and had a long conversation with my wife. I told her that I couldn't do this anymore. I had to go after something that made me feel alive. The problem was, I had no idea what that something was. Sure, I had some vague ideas, but nothing concrete. That's when I started brainstorming. I had always loved fitness, but I wasn't a personal trainer or anything. I had a passion for working out, eating healthy, and maintaining a balanced lifestyle, so I thought, why not turn this into a business? For the next few months, I did nothing but research. I didn't have a clear plan, but I knew that something had to change. I started looking into online fitness coaching, digital products, and other related fields. After a while, I decided that launching an online fitness platform could be the answer. I had no technical experience or design skills, but I was determined to make it work. My plan was simple: create a website where people could access workout plans, nutrition advice, and resources on how to live a healthier life. The first obstacle was getting started. I didn't have much saved up at the time. My wife and I had a small savings account, but it wasn't enough to cover the cost of building a website and paying for marketing. I decided to take a leap and put everything I had into it. I learned how to build websites, used free templates, and poured countless hours into learning SEO and content marketing. In the evenings, I'd stay up late reading about the fitness industry, studying competitors, and trying to figure out how to make my site stand out in such a crowded space. Fast forward to the launch day. I had my website, some basic workout plans, and a few nutrition guides, but I was terrified. I had no social media following, no brand recognition, and barely any experience. My expectations were low. I thought maybe a handful of people would sign up, but I wasn't holding my breath. To my surprise, within the first 2 months, I had over 200 subscribers. It wasn't a huge number, but for someone who was starting from scratch, it felt like a victory. The real challenge, though, came when I realized that running a business was so much more than just offering a product. Customer service, marketing, email campaigns, and staying on top of everything else was exhausting. There were times when I felt like giving up. I didn't know how to scale the business or even how to keep it running smoothly. But every time I felt like throwing in the towel, I remembered why I started in the first place. I wanted to be in control of my life, to create something meaningful, and to help people live healthier lives. The breakthrough moment came about 6 months into my journey. I decided to start creating content on Instagram and YouTube. I didn't have fancy cameras or editing equipment, but I just started recording basic workout tutorials, sharing fitness tips, and talking about my journey. Slowly but surely, my following began to grow. People started reaching out to me for advice, and I began offering personalized fitness coaching as an additional service. The more content I created, the more I learned about my audience, and the more I refined my offerings to meet their needs. I also made some strategic decisions along the way. For instance, I partnered with other fitness influencers who had a larger following than me. They helped promote my content, and in return, I offered them a small commission for each person who signed up for my program. This partnership strategy was one of the most effective ways I gained traction in the early stages. After about a year of grinding, I was finally seeing the fruits of my labor. The business was profitable, but I knew I couldn't do it all on my own forever. I hired a small team to help with marketing, customer service, and content creation. That's when the business really started to grow. I was no longer bogged down with the day-to-day tasks. Instead, I was able to focus on big-picture strategies, improving my offerings, and connecting with my community. 2 years after launching, I found myself in a position I never thought possible. My company was generating enough income that I was able to quit my full-time job and work on my business full-time. My wife and I were able to travel more, enjoy life without constant worry, and I felt like I was finally in control of my own destiny. But the most rewarding part was hearing from people whose lives had changed because of my work. One woman told me that my fitness program helped her lose 30 pounds and gain confidence. A man reached out to thank me for the mental clarity and discipline he gained from following my nutrition plan. These messages were what kept me going through all the tough times. Now, as I look back on everything, I can't believe how far I've come. It hasn't been easy, and I still face challenges every day, but the journey has been worth it. The thing I've learned the most is that success doesn't happen overnight. It's about persistence, learning from mistakes, and, above all, being willing to take that first step, even if you don't know where it will lead. If there's one piece of advice I could give anyone thinking about starting their own business, it's this: don't wait for the perfect moment. There will never be a perfect time. There will always be obstacles, setbacks, and doubt, but that's part of the process. If you want to succeed, you have to take the leap, even if you're unsure of where you're headed. That leap will lead you to places you never imagined, and you'll discover strengths in yourself you didn't even know existed. Just keep moving forward, and the rest will follow. I've been a full-time entrepreneur for about 10 years now, and it's been one of the wildest rides of my life. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was brutal at times, but it was the best decision I've ever made. This is my story, and I hope it helps someone out there who's thinking about taking the plunge into entrepreneurship. Or maybe it will just be a reminder that we're all in the same boat at times. I started my journey in my early 20s. I had always been the creative type: drawing, writing, music, and tech stuff. When I was in college, I decided that I was going to go into the tech industry because that's where all the money was. At first, I thought that meant I had to follow a traditional path, so I interned at a big company and thought I was on my way. But every day, I was working for someone else's vision, not my own. It felt suffocating. I would wake up, go to work, sit through meetings, and then go home exhausted. The whole time, I kept thinking I could be doing something on my own. It wasn't until about 3 years into my job that the seed of entrepreneurship was planted. I remember reading a book called The Lean Startup by Eric Ries, and something in that book struck me. It was about how to create a business with minimal resources, test ideas quickly, and fail fast. That was the light bulb moment for me. I could start small, test the waters, and learn as I went along. The idea of building something from the ground up, creating a business that reflected my own passion, was thrilling. I started planning my escape from my job, but the truth was, I had no idea what I was doing. I had no business background, no connections, and definitely no funding. The idea I settled on was building a small software tool for entrepreneurs that helped with organizing tasks and projects. I figured that if I could build it for myself, others would want it too. So, I worked nights and weekends on the project while still holding down my full-time job. The first few months were grueling. I had to learn coding, user experience design, marketing, and how to run a business all at once. I'd be up until 3 a.m. most nights working on the project, then go to my 9 to 5 job, half asleep. There were a lot of nights when I thought about giving up. The amount of work felt overwhelming, and I often doubted whether anyone would care about what I was creating. But somehow, I kept going. I guess that's the first lesson in entrepreneurship. Keep moving, even when you're not sure it'll work. Eventually, after about 6 months, I had a prototype. It was basic, nothing fancy, but it worked. I launched the product to a small group of people I knew and got some early feedback. To my surprise, a few people actually liked it. They gave me suggestions, which I took to heart, and I improved the tool. Slowly, the user base grew, and I began to think, hey, maybe I can actually turn this into a business. The next hurdle was monetization. At first, I offered the tool for free, just to build a user base. But after a few months, I realized I needed to start charging if I wanted this to be sustainable. I decided on a freemium model. Basic features were free, but advanced features required a subscription. I'll admit, pricing was one of the hardest things to figure out. I didn't know how to price it, I didn't know what people would pay, and I didn't want to scare anyone away. I started small with a low price point and gradually increased it as the product improved and as people saw the value. The first few months of charging for the tool were terrifying. I had no idea if anyone would actually pay. I remember the first time someone paid for the tool. I literally jumped up and screamed with excitement. It wasn't a huge amount of money, but it was the validation I needed. People were willing to pay for what I was offering, and that was a game changer. But as anyone who's run a business will tell you, success doesn't come easy. I still had to juggle the software development, customer support, and marketing. There were days when I felt completely overwhelmed. There were bugs in the software that I couldn't figure out how to fix, customers who were unhappy, and periods where it felt like the business was stagnating. During these moments, I doubted myself again. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe I should go back to my old job. The breakthrough came when I started focusing more on my users. I began reaching out directly to them, asking for feedback and getting to know them. I found out what they liked, what they didn't, and what they wanted to see in future updates. It wasn't just about building a product anymore. It was about building relationships with my users. I started a community around the product, engaged with them on social media, and held webinars to show them how to use the tool more effectively. In time, the product began to grow. I had to hire my first employee, a developer, to help with the workload. I also brought on a marketing person who helped me craft a strategy for reaching more people. Slowly, the business started to take off. I began to make enough money to quit my day job, which was both terrifying and exhilarating. I'll never forget the moment I walked into my boss's office and handed in my resignation. I had no backup plan, no safety net, but it felt like the right decision. The next few years were a whirlwind. The company grew, and we started expanding our product line, but it wasn't always smooth sailing. There were many times when I felt like we were on the brink of failure. Cash flow issues, competition from bigger companies, hiring the wrong people. There were a lot of obstacles. But every time we hit a setback, I learned something new and adjusted. It's like that saying goes, success is not final, failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts. Fast forward to today, and we've got a solid team, a growing customer base, and a sustainable business. I've been able to work with some incredible people, and we're doing things I never thought possible when I first started. We've had some major wins, and there have been a lot of failures along the way. But through it all, I've learned that entrepreneurship isn't about avoiding failure. It's about learning how to fail better each time. Looking back, I can't believe how far we've come. I'm still the same person, but the experience of building something from nothing has changed me. I've learned to trust my instincts, to embrace failure, and to always keep pushing forward, no matter how hard it gets. If you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple: take the leap. It won't be easy, but if you're passionate and persistent, it can be the most rewarding thing you'll ever do. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.